basically, there's been a deal that's gone through this week, which is, the RFU is pumping money, as we've been asking, but in exchange for more control for Steve Borthwick over his elite players. 25 players will have something called an enhanced contract, and that means Borthwick gets a say over their playing time, their medical issues, their S&C. So basically, it's more power over players than an England coach has ever had. It's an 8-year deal. The clubs will get more money. I think it's 33 million into the Gallagher Premiership, but obviously Borthwick gets more control in exchange for that. Question to the floor: what do we think? There are obviously a couple of issues that I want to raise, but I want to hear what you guys think. Clean slate.
Well, I see trouble ahead, Ollie, because nothing is set in stone. If you're talking about those sums of money and that degree of control, there has to be written down. Everything seems to be up for negotiation. Steve Borthwick will have a bigger say. He will have a bigger input. England medics will have a bigger say. They will have a bigger input. Yes, but who decides whether 3 extra players play that European match on Saturday? Who actually decides it? And Rob Baxter sounded a bit lukewarm about it, I thought, when he was interviewed on it. And he also, very interestingly, thought there was a bit of payback going on here about the COVID and the lack of support that the Premiership teams feel they got during COVID from the RFU. And the RFU have used this sort of enhanced power to sort of drive a deal through. Now, I thought that was very interesting from Rob, who's not a guy who says stuff like that without thinking it through. So, outwardly, it seems a good, quite a good positive move. But I think there's going to be arguments and eruptions about this in months and seasons to come.
I think the lack of tangibility around the deal is a problem, and obviously you do think there will be loopholes and technicalities that would allow a potential degree of extra control afforded to England. At the same time, obviously, Chewy, the money is much needed, and in that way, it's a semi-good thing.
Look, I'm completely with Brendan, and I suspect you on this, Ollie. It's not a fudge as such. But it's a massive grey cloud. It's like a big sort of bunch of cumulonimbus on paper, isn't it? Because you can't see your way through every eventuality. Anyone interested in the game, it will take them 10 seconds to read this stuff and then say, yeah, but what if? And then there's no answer. Rob Baxter is a sort of bit of the honest broker spokesman for the clubs. I mean, he's been absolutely fantastic value, not just for the press, with whom he plays a blinder on a weekly basis, but the game in general. He is the guy who actually puts his finger on the problems and gives voice to them, not in any sort of wild or exaggerated way. He just quietly sits there. I mean, he categorizes a farmer's common sense and says, well, actually, that looks like this, but in fact, it could be like that. And we're all going to have to suck it and see. And we're not going to know the answers to a lot of the questions that people are asking about this deal until the actual precise events arise and we see how things unfold. And if you're in charge of a player's medical setup and strength and conditioning, as Rob says, you're basically deciding when he plays. And if that's now in the hands, if those contracted players, if those areas are in the hands of the England side of things rather than the club side of things, then England have enormous power over individual players. In return for that, the clubs have got a bag of money. The lion's share of this, the Championship clubs must be scratching their heads and wondering what the hell, where do we go from here? There's still enormous sort of confusion, unclarity, if that's a word, which it probably isn't, around promotion and relegation. That all seems to be still to be negotiated box in the end, because there are so many get-outs and let-ins and what have you. There's no clarity there at all, as far as I can see. So in that sense, nothing much has changed. The gaps between the Premiership and the Championship is so huge as to be barely bridgeable. And it'll be, what do the broadcasters think about seeing a side come up who obviously aren't going to be able to win a game all season? They're not going to be very keen on that. It's not like the French system, It's much more of a turf war in England between the union and the clubs than we see in France. So yes, we needed a deal because the clubs financially, most of them have their backs against the wall. Gloucester are a real concern at the moment, you know. The stuff that they themselves put out as to their financial prospects, it didn't fill anyone with any great sense of hope or joy. They are finding it very difficult. The COVID loans make it more difficult. And there are fears that they could be in quite a difficult financial situation. Well, that's terrible. I mean, how many more teams are we looking to lose?
You'd have to think that ticket prices won't be dropping either. Obviously.
Jesus, but Bath and Exeter, it's 90, best part of 100 quid a throw.
Well, this is the thing, and obviously you're now seeing England players far less. Obviously, people pay to see the best players in the world on the pitch. Who's going to book a game around December time, post-November internationals, when your Maro Itoje's need a break? Obviously, last season he didn't get a break, but you can sort of bet your bottom dollar that he certainly will this year. Would you pay that much money? No. And Stuart was saying how Pro D does sell tickets out. Gallagher Premiership struggled last year. Newcastle fill their tiny stadium. You'd have to think it'll be the same, if not worse, this year now, because you can't guarantee that you'll be seeing the superstars that you're paying to see.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, I take the superstar argument with a pinch of salt because rugby just ain't a game where the same boats can play every week. It's just not. Even if there wasn't an international call-up, international control dimension to this discussion, there are just injuries. Or tiredness, or what have you. And actually, if you're just going to play the same 15 blokes every week, if you can, what does that say about your squad numbers? Where then do you get the younger players get their opportunities to play? So there's a whole bag of issues around that. I think supporters can only expect so much in terms of selection, that what they can expect is not to pay the best part of 100 quid at Bath to sit on the flower pots in the teeth of the prevailing southwesterly, which may well be accompanied by a torrential rain, get absolutely soaked to the skin. So it's a sort of rain version of being Captain Oates. You paid 100 quid for the privilege, and you've watched a game that may or may not be on a ploughed field. Look forward to all the responses on social media, chaps. I'm not on it, but you can let me know what they say.
They'll show up at your front door, mate.
People in Bath know what I think about things,
and they all know where you live as well, probably.
Well, they will after you put it up there online. Yeah.